to you a little bit from a chapter called Brother and Sister. Some of you know that. Now, I warn you, as I said before, it's a little bit bloody. Okay. Once upon a time, a brother and a sister clasped hands and strode out of the White Mountains, across green hills, and into a large and wonderful world. Trees towered above them like the pillars of heaven, strong and straight all the way up. Birds sang and flitted by their faces. Little rodents, chipmunks, squirrels, mice dashed in and out of the underbrush. A fawn appeared and looked at them from behind a stand of ferns, and then bounded off after his mother. Everything was greener here, more full of life than anywhere Hansel and Gretel had ever been. The vibrant power of the place began to take hold of the children. Hansel rushed out ahead of his sister, bounding through the ferns and then running back again like a dog which had let off his tether. Gretel laughed and sang and collected bluebottles, daisies, and other wild flowers. "We can make a life here," she shouted to her brother. Hansel hooted with delight and took off after a low-flying blackbird. Soon the two came to a clearing where there stood a magnificent tree. It rose to such heights that they could barely make out where the lowest branches began, but they could see, if they looked really hard, a great crown of green far up above them. If you're trying to follow along, it's page 72. Gretel jumped when she noticed in the wood of the tree what appeared to be a woman's face. It was made of bark, with brown hair wrapping around the smooth cheeks and wide eyes. Gretel walked up to it, mesmerized. Okay. I'm going to skip a couple pages because I don't want to take too long with the reading. They talk to the tree. And the tree speaks to them and says, "You can come and live in the forest with me, but you can't take more than you need. Everything here is in a very delicate balance, so don't take more than you need." And she directs them to a clearing where they make a little hut for themselves, and Gretel starts a little garden. So, Gretel gathered seeds to begin a garden, and Hansel gathered nuts and berries for supper. That night, they feasted. Gretel swore that nothing could make her happier, and Hansel agreed. They decided that they needed nothing else, certainly not parents, and that they would be able to live very happily, just like this, for the rest of their lives. Yeah, right. Oh, did I say that out loud?
Yeah.
The next day, Hansel was gathering food for dinner as Gretel tended their garden. He walked beneath the towering trees and heard the birds singing as they flitted by, and he thought, what excitement! I want to be part of it all. Just then, a brown rabbit ran across the path. Hansel felt his legs twitch. Before he knew it, he was pursuing the rabbit through the underbrush. As the sun set that evening, he walked back into the clearing, exhausted, but as happy as the chirruping birds. He had the rabbit in his hand. It was dead. He placed it before Gretel on the ground. "Now we must make a fire," he said, "and eat." Gretel was upset. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "We didn't need this." Suddenly, Hansel felt very sorry for having killed the small beast, though he had enjoyed hunting him so. They made a fire and cooked the rabbit and ate it so it would not go to waste. But Gretel made him promise not to kill any more animals. "We have everything we need right here," she said. "Remember what the tree told us." He felt bad and promised. The next day, as he walked through the woods looking for nuts and berries, he saw a tiny baby fawn nosing a stand of fern. What's a fawn? Yes, sir. A baby deer, that's right. So it's a baby fawn. It's a really, really little deer. His legs began to twitch again. His legs began to twitch again, and his heart began to race. He remembered what his sister had made him promise. He told himself to turn away. There was something about the air here, the color of the green, the musty scent of the wood, that made him want to burst as he watched the tiny fawn among the fronds of fern. He couldn't help it. In a flash, he lit off after the frightened creature. As the sun set that evening, he walked back into the clearing, exhausted but as happy as the little animals that run among the underbrush. Over his shoulder was slung the fawn. He placed it before his sister on the ground. "What have you done?" she cried. He attempted to calm her. "Now we can eat meat for a whole month," he said, "and I won't have to kill another animal for a long, long time." Gretel had eaten as much of the fawn as they could that night, and it looked as if they hadn't even touched it. Now the carcass lay outside on the grass, attracting flies, its stench wafting over their beautiful clearing. As Hansel stared at it, he vowed to be his own master and not let his impulses carry him away again. The next day, before he went out to find fruit, Gretel made him swear on his very life that he would kill nothing else. He swore it and hugged her and kissed her for being so good and so forgiving, and he promised he would do nothing violent ever again as long as they remained in this forest. She kissed him on his forehead as if he were much younger than she, and sent him off for the nuts and fruit. He spent the whole day basking in the lovely green light of the leaves, picking berries and storing them in his tattered shirt, which he tied around his waist like an apron. He felt the peacefulness and calm of the forest, and he wondered why he hadn't always been able to feel it, why he had been overcome the last 2 days with that uncontrollable animal lust. And then he saw a white dove perching on a nearby branch. Something tingled in his arms and legs. Don't, he told himself. It's wrong. He started to shake. Go home. Turn away and go home. But he found himself creeping in the direction of the dove. The berries fell to the ground. As the sun set that evening, he walked back into the clearing, exhausted but as happy as a sated wolf. Blood covered his arms and his face, and he carried in his hands the broken, eviscerated carcass of the white dove. Gretel screamed when she saw him. "What have you done?" she cried. "Hansel, what's wrong with you?" Hansel stopped. Then he looked down at the dead bird. He noticed that his arms were covered in blood and berry juice. He wondered where the berries were. Gretel began to cry. Hansel, confused and upset, placed the dead dove at her feet. She backed away from him, covering her face. He looked at her and felt awful, but not as awful as he had felt the night before. He turned and walked back into the woods. Gretel saw Hansel only infrequently after that. Occasionally, as she was out collecting berries, she saw him running through the forest after some animal or other. At first, he had stopped to speak with her, just a few words each time. But soon she noticed that words were not coming as easily to him as they once had. And he was ever and always looking off over his shoulder, or following the flights of birds with jerky movements of his head. Soon, he wasn't stopping to speak to her at all. She found animal carcasses littered all over the forest. Some were half-eaten, others barely touched. Once she found a wild boar, larger than Hansel, with its neck broken. She wondered how Hansel had the strength to do such a thing. She wondered how he had the heart to do it. She saw him only in flashes now. A blur of skin through the trees, the scream of a dying animal, and then a howl of delight. She thought he looked different. He was growing hair on his face, on his back. She was frightened to be in the wood by herself, particularly at night. She heard howling that hadn't been there when they'd first come to the forest. She wondered if it was Hansel. She stayed closer and closer to the hut for fear of seeing him. Then, one day, he wandered into the clearing. Gretel stared. He walked bent now. He had hair all over his body, his arms, his back, his face, his chest. Wordlessly, he offered a handful of berries. She offered him a handful of berries and nuts. He snarled at her. She dropped them and hurried into the hut. He growled and stalked around the clearing for a few minutes. Gretel wondered if he would kill her, but he left. Leave it off, just go hang her there. If you want to find out what happens to Gretel, Hansel, the animal boy, you guys, before I let you guys ask me questions, I'd like to ask you a question. In the very back of this book, here, there's a little short biography of me. And then I say something about myself. I say I'm a teacher, and I say Adam always writes about things that he's experienced personally. So while all the dark and grim things in this book really did happen